I'm Kevin Haynes, the CEO at Reveal Security, and I'm here with my good friend Mike Melo. Mike?
Hey there, Mike Melo, the CISO of the TMX Group.
And so Mike, you've been in security a long time. One of the things that you and I have had some conversations about is identity security, and it seems like, starting to pick up some steam, a hot topic right now. Seems like, a lot we're hearing about that. Are you sort of seeing the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's this constant struggle with security leaders and groups on what do we deal with this mess of identity, right? It's not that it's brand new. I think we're seeing a lot of nuances and changes in the identity threat landscape, but it's still something that most CISOs struggle with on a day-to-day basis in their organizations.
Yeah, and it seems like, one of the things that I keep getting questions about recently are non-human identities. So it seems like maybe there's a little angle to it that is getting some attention, and maybe there's a tie from sort of the AI and agentic and those types of topics that's driving some awareness. So I think it's good. But how do you think about like the non-human versus, sort of the human part of this?
Yeah, I'd say there's probably a couple key differentiators with the NHI space and the human space. Obviously, we've been dealing with human identities for quite a long time, but it's pretty stagnant, right? Like it's based on your employee workforce, and unless you're going through major acquisition or growth, it's really not changing too much, right? So things are kind of there. Obviously, you have the lifecycle management aspect where people could get new roles and new functions. Kind of what is the the movement and that life cycle of that identity. But the NHI space is explosive, right? And we've seen over probably the last 5 years NHI just go kind of vertical, right? Where we have the need for greater development environments, right? Organizations are really emphasizing a lot more in the development arms and being able to be more dynamic, adoption of more and more cloud technology, SaaS platforms. We're seeing a ton of NHI explosion. And that is obviously, exceeding the limits of what we saw in human identity, right? You're looking at least a minimum of 10x in the volume of NHI versus human.
Yeah, and it's, in some ways it's good because that's getting a lot of attention to the whole space, right?
Absolutely.
One of the things I've been talking about for a while is it's really, you can't defend what you can't see.
Right.
And so one of the things that we're obsessed about is what happens after authentication. So, the identity has the token, whether it's human or non, the identity has the token, and what is it actually doing in the applications. And it seems like, just from my perspective, that the industry has sort of somewhat, it's been ignored a little bit, but it seems to be picking up, and of course we're obsessed about that. But how does that sort of show up for you in terms of how you think about defending the applications? And I'm very curious about how you think about the accountability, responsibility of that, because some of them are business applications, maybe they're kind of owned by the business, and some of them are maybe more infrastructure related. But from a CISO perspective, how do you think about defending that, and is it something that you think is a rising priority?
Yeah. Well, I say first and foremost, you're bang on with the visibility piece, right? Like we can't protect what we don't know, and we can't obviously protect what we can't see.
Yeah.
So, and there's been an explosive pattern with postural management solutions, and giving us kind of that visibility and landscape into what's going on, which has been great. And we're getting a lot more ROI benefits out of our tools through that. But on the identity space, that's this post-authentication, right? If you look at what the attack vector is in an organization, the anchor point is an identity.
Yeah.
They need an identity to go and do whatever it is they're trying to do. And so when you claim an identity and you go through the authentication, we're pretty blind in most senses, right? We rely too heavily on EDR, sometimes NDR, but you're not really inferring from all the different data sources what's happening, what's transpiring, right? So you can see behavior on one application and it's pretty innocuous, right? And it's like, okay, well, that's something, but it's not really enough to materially say with confidence, hey, I got a situation on my hands. So getting visibility across the entire, post-authentication application landscape is going to be massive for any company, right? And to your point, you're seeing a ton of application sprawl into business lines. We've been trying to combat shadow IT forever, right? And so whether it's an HR system, whether it's a sales system, security needs to have some sort of hook into what's transpiring on the back end of that application, right? Not just on a customer basis, but also on the internal employee side. Like, how are we interfacing with some of our most sensitive data, right? And is this a problem?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, having the visibility into that is going to be crucial now more than ever.
Yeah, I'm really curious. So one of the things that you remember back in the day with sort of the IPS, IDS type, and when are we going to flip the switch to let it start taking some blocking action? And with identity, I think there's an equal opportunity to actually act preemptively on some of these things. As you start to see an identity sort of starting to deviate, and before it accomplishes its objective, to take some action, right? And I see an array of like, okay, yeah, just do it, right? Don't tell me later.
Yeah.
To like, no, like I want to hit the button. How do you think of, what do you think that looks like? And you sort of now with the speed of things, right, in which they may occur with the NHI, what do you think we have to be prepared for in terms of actually being more preemptive?
Yeah. So I kind of have this analogy of, the security space was always this: we were chasing the person who's walking down the sidewalk. And we've been doing it for like 30 years.
Yeah.
And we still haven't caught them, right? Now we're chasing an Olympic sprinter, right? With like AI and NHI. And so we need tools to be able to intervene, right? Or you're going to start seeing the entry point to compromise shrink significantly. Yeah. And so I think in the identity space, I'm pretty bullish on the fact that we can utilize automation, remediation, and blocking mechanisms that are probably a lot less disruptive to the organization.
Right.
When you look at some of the other areas around, if I lock down like a network segment or an endpoint, very intrusive, right? It's not to say identity isn't intrusive either, but I'd rather lock down an identity on a server system than a server itself.
Yeah.
So I think there's going to be a little bit more of leniency and maybe kind of helping companies into the cultural shift of, we need to be able to flip a switch immediately to prevent, a big boom.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be a challenge over the next little while with CISOs, and it has been for a long time, on how do we get into automation of remediation? How do we gain the confidence and trust of that automation is going to do the right thing and be as, not impactful as possible? Obviously, things are still going to happen, right?
Yeah.
There's probably going to still be operational impacts, but we need to start taking that step forward and really leaning into these tools, because without them, we're going to get run over.
I think you're right. I think there's especially on identity, there's some sort of balance between putting obstacles or barriers in front of the threat actor. And if you got it wrong, it's very disruptive to the threat actor, but not really disruptive to a legit end user, if that makes sense. Yeah. And how do you find that balance of the actions so that it might be a little annoying to an end user if you got it wrong, but that same thing would be disruptive to the the person who worked to get that identity, to your point earlier, and that now has to sort of go back and start over.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think to that point, right? When we kind of drill back, there's not a terrible amount of use cases where an end user interactively being engaged in something is so mission critical to the business that it would knock the business down, right? Whereas you have things like server operations, and this is where it'll kind of get gray in the NHI space with service accounts and just different types of automations going, that, you might be doing like 1 million transactions a minute, and knocking something out, could obviously have significant impact. But I think kind of starting that into the human space is going to be a really good entryway, and then moving into the NHI space is going to be prudent. Again, like it's too much out there. We can't possibly compute what's going on.
At that speed.
And the attack speed is crazy, right? The inference of data is going to come into play as well. We need to be able to use tools to infer what's going to happen with identities and start getting more proactive and stop them before we, to a certain threshold.
So Mike, there's a lot of buzz around kind of AI and how does, the speed at which AI might, enhance attacks and things like that. I'm kind of in the fence of, I think it actually will put more advanced tools into sort of the common, sort of moving things down the pyramid from sort of your A teams down to your B and C teams, sort of powering them up. I think that's kind of how I think about it. But there's a lot of talk about the speed of the attacks and related to AI. How do you think about it?
Yeah, I definitely, I'm of the same philosophy, right? I would say we're starting to see a level up in the attack space with the AI attacks, right? We're seeing things in the social engineering side, in just how the behavior of the attack is becoming more efficient when you actually land, right? It's not a human who's sometimes maybe stumbling through something. And I think you're starting to see different behaviors of the AI versus a human. Right, again, the AI is kind of this logical step through gate of I got to do this almost. It's not quite super intuitive, and it might not look the same as a human attacker, right? So I think that there's definitely this interesting mix between what a AI attacker is going to look like and what a human attacker is going to look like, and it'll kind of be cool to see how that converges over time. But I definitely think with the AI attack, areas, we're definitely going to start seeing, greater push down into that pyramid.
Yeah.
More people are going to have access. Like script kiddies are going to be way more powerful than what they used to.
That's
right. Yeah, it's pretty frightening, right? Yeah. So it's essentially growing the army. Out there. The external threat landscape is just going to get more real for us on a more constant basis. And I think that, a lot of obviously nation state organized crime units are ultimately investing way more into this. And we're seeing a lot of other companies outside of, specific security functions, like the Metas of the world, Facebooks and Amazons, they're investing heavily in AI infrastructure right now, Microsoft as well. And I think the other challenge we're going to start seeing is when people hook into those infrastructures and those brains and engines, and then what is going to be the possible of that, right? That's going to be kind of the scary thing beyond. But I think we're already seeing it now. We're seeing the early stages of AI attacks for sure.
I think so too. For me, it just sort of solidifies. You've got to have the ability to you need IOCs and you need to be able to detect those IOCs. But we're moving into a world where behavior, you're going to have to be able to look at the behavior and discern, what's good from bad.
Absolutely. And right, we were kind of talking about the speed of everything, and it's just getting faster, and we can't compute that fast, right? Like we have to have tooling that is matching what's coming in on an offensive perspective. And in order to do that, I think that's where the behavioral thing is going to kick in really, really nicely for us, is that we're not going to be able to compete on the compute side. And we need to start understanding what are these behavior patterns that we're going to start seeing from things like AI, and kind of what is that differentiation between a human and an AI attacker.